Welcome to another episode of Pod for Good. I am your Chief Philanthropod, Jesse Ulrich.
And I'm your Vice Admiral Philanthropod, Chris Miller.
And today our guest is Aaron Bolzle, Executive Director of Tulsa Remote.
Today we talk to Aaron about how Tulsa Remote is helping diversify Tulsa in every sense of the word, how the community spirit of Tulsa is winning over participants, and how Tulsa Remote has already been a huge success.
Remember to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, or anywhere podcasts can be found. You can also now rate our podcast at ratemypodcast.com/podforgood. Enjoy. We are very excited to have Aaron Bolzle on the podcast today. Hello, Aaron.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
We are excited to have you, and we're excited to talk about Tulsa Remote, the program that you are the executive director of. So, real briefly, not that any of our listeners probably don't know what Tulsa Remote is, but just in case they don't, give me the 30-second rundown of what Tulsa Remote does.
Sure. So Tulsa Remote is an initiative of the George Kaiser Family Foundation. We launched in November of 2018, the first cohort. The intention is to attract talented people from all over the country who have the flexibility to work from wherever to come and work in Tulsa for a year. So we launched the first year. It was really successful. So we just launched our second year in October.
Now, as I was reading, you originally expected maybe 20 people in the first group, and it ended up being like 100.
So when we first launched, I think we talked about having 600 to 1,000 people apply throughout the year, and we surpassed that in the first day. So we had to start reconsidering what was the best thing to do for Tulsa. And we had originally thought maybe 20 or 25 people, but the caliber of the people who applied was just so incredible that we decided to expand it to 100. So we ended up inviting 100 people last year.
So when people apply, what are some of the things that you look for in an ideal candidate?
You know, I get that question a lot, and it's hard to define parameters about what makes somebody a really great fit for the program. We try to make sure that the program is as diverse as possible in every aspect of that word. I would say that the true common thread, though, through all the people that we selected was an individual who cares more about what they give to a community than what they get. And that can be in multiple different ways, but it's basically just an individual who's really excited to be a proactive member in a community and give back to that community.
How do you connect them with the community once they come here?
We do that in a number of different ways. So the first is to make sure that the individuals feel connected to each other. So we really try to cultivate a sense of belonging within the Tulsa Remote group. We have monthly dinners where all of the individuals get together. We give them updates about the program. We usually have special guests come and talk about different initiatives throughout Tulsa. Another way we help them get connected or provide a sense of community is events that we sponsor throughout the year where we invite Tulsans to come and connect with the Tulsa Remote participants. We also have community engagement individuals on our team who are actively working to get the individuals connected to people within the community. We find it to be the most important aspect of the program to get the individuals that come into Tulsa connected to people who have already been living in Tulsa so that both parties can benefit from Tulsa Remote. Additionally, we try to support programs and events that are already happening in the Tulsa community, organizations that are already active in the Tulsa community by providing awareness to the people who are in our program, to those organizations.
And what would you say is the sort of long-term purpose and vision for Tulsa Remote?
For any community to thrive, there needs to be an influx of talented and diverse individuals. And what we saw was that there were a ton of individuals living in major cities that didn't know that Tulsa was a strong option for them. They considered other cities like Portland, Austin, Nashville, Denver, but Tulsa really never made that list. And it wasn't because of what Tulsa lacks. It really came down to a lack of perception of Tulsa and the reality that is the city. Because of the leaders in Tulsa over the last 15 years, the city is really evolved dramatically. I grew up in Tulsa. I was born and raised. I left for around 15 years. So thanks for doing all the work while I was gone.
Yeah. Listen, I thank him for that all the time. Yeah, that'd be Chris. So,
and so it's really about exposing those talented people who are already looking for a new place to live. That Tulsa could be a really great option. So the long-term goal is to develop the most vibrant and inclusive Tulsa possible. And that really comes down to, again, attracting diverse individuals that help enhance the already talented community that's here and provide more opportunity for the individuals that live in Tulsa. We don't have the most diverse industry of any city in the country, but if you can attract remote workers from all over the country in all types of industries, you can extremely quickly diversify the representation of industry.
And I feel like remote workers have sometimes a little more freedom to be more community engaged than people who have a 9-to-5 office job and have to be at one place all the time. Remote people can do their work from a local coffee shop, can go to the library, can have lunch meetings. So it's an interesting angle. My question when I first heard about this program was, like, both of us moved away, came back. Would that $10,000 have been not better used, but differently used to attract people who moved away to come back?
So we don't differentiate between individuals that were from Tulsa and left and came back and people who have never been to Tulsa. If individuals that have left Tulsa want to participate in the program, we're really excited about that. The $10,000 is meant to remove a barrier. It removes risk. The risk of there's a financial risk in moving to a new city. So if you can remove that risk and provide additional incentives, the community development aspects, the co-working space, my opinion is that you're developing a program that really attracts the right type of people. The people who were actively looking at moving into a new community, hadn't considered Tulsa before, said, why not try it? Come and visit, see what makes this town special, and spend a year getting connected.
I know that you've just passed the sort of year one mark, so you don't necessarily have the data to answer this question, but what would be success for Tulsa Remote going forward of those people? How many of them would need to stay for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years for you to look back on and be like, okay, this worked, this brought, new energy, new ideas, and new people to Tulsa?
I think there are a lot of different ways that you can measure success. In one way, we've already been extremely successful. The exposure of Tulsa to the rest of the world has been pretty huge. Over 3 billion in reach at this point. People who had never heard of the city before are now thinking of a town that is moving in the right direction, that's willing to take chances, that are attracting really talented people. In other ways, we've already been successful. The people who have come through in the first year have already gotten incredibly connected to the community and are helping the existing leaders push issues forward that they're really passionate about. I would say the greatest example of success would be that the individuals that come in like living in Tulsa and choose to stay here longer than the year. And while I don't expect every single person to stay, I think the vast majority are going to stay. And the feedback that I've gotten from them anecdotally is that they are happy and they're excited. I mean, it didn't help this year that we had a tornado and an earthquake in the same week. But for the most part, people are extraordinarily excited about Tulsa and have been really happy about the decision to move here.
And you don't have to get into specifics, but I'm curious, what are some of the more interesting people who have moved here, either the type of work they do, where they came from, or people that have interesting stories?
That's always a really difficult question for me to answer because each individual that came through the program is really incredible. And I am really lucky that I've gotten to know every single person and have learned their story. So it's difficult. I can talk about Lily, who's a Harlem Globetrotter who came through the program, was one of the first people to transition into Tulsa. And just the work that she does is pretty incredible, not only within the Harlem Globetrotters, but also within outreach through her profession. I can think of people who are in education, somebody who creates English as a second language educational programming for a language company out of New York. So I think that's really interesting that there's a person who helps develop curriculum that helps people who are learning English as a second language feel more included. So there are just so many amazing individuals. There's an individual here who's already started a nonprofit in Tulsa, who volunteers teaching disadvantaged elementary school students debate. Some really amazing individuals. Cool. But I hate narrowing it down because
I understand.
We could spend the entire podcast talking about each one of the individuals and how incredible they are.
Yeah. So what are some of so after they finish their first year, what kind of support do you expect to continue to provide and to help keep them connected?
I believe that the greatest incentive of the entire program is the community that they inherit when they come to Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
Tulsa has community in spades. That's our greatest strength. What makes a city is the people, and Tulsa has incredible people. But we also provide that community within Tulsa Remote. So we have a Slack work group that all the Tulsa Remote participants are a part of. As you can imagine, moving into a new city and immediately getting accepted into a Slack channel is probably a pretty amazing crutch to help you with some of the transitions that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I get my haircut? Where do I get good tacos?
Mm-hmm.
Important questions like that.
Right.
So I don't see any of the community aspects going away.
Mm-hmm.
The people who came through the first year are becoming ambassadors to Tulsa, and those who choose to stay are the best people possible to help the new people who are coming
Mm-hmm.
into Tulsa understand the transition into the community, right? So they know what it was like to move from another city to Tulsa. They know the barriers. And that's the thing, that we try to be really authentic and vulnerable about the pros and cons to Tulsa. We don't paint Tulsa as a utopia. We don't try to sell people to a bill of goods that we can't deliver on.
Mm-hmm.
So there are obstacles in moving into a new community, any community. We just happen to think that the pros far outweigh the cons here in Tulsa.
So you said that you lived somewhere else for 15 years. Where were you?
So I, like many kids all across the country, left the state to go to college, and I ended up going to school in Boston. After that, I worked in New York City. My first job was at a record label in New York City. And then I got the unbelievable opportunity to go work at iTunes for almost a decade out in San Francisco. So I was there before there was an app store and after we launched Apple Music. So old school Silicon Valley. It was a pretty amazing experience. And in 2015, I decided to leave Apple. I loved it, but I just felt like the choices were be a lifer or try something new. And I decided to try something new. And so I was working as a consultant, living in San Francisco and flying down to LA every week. And as attractive as that sounds, it gets tiring pretty quickly. And I just knew that I didn't want to move to LA. I liked the city, but it just felt it felt exhausting thinking about starting over in a fourth major city.
Yeah.
And I honestly felt lucky that I knew that Tulsa was a viable option, because everybody else in San Francisco was talking about Portland or Denver or Austin. And all of those cities are fantastic cities, but they're already kind of oversaturated with people moving from California. And the biggest obstacle in moving to a new community is, how am I going to meet people? And am I going to be welcomed? And there's a perception, at least I felt it in San Francisco, that moving from Silicon Valley to Denver, Austin, or Nashville, or Portland, I was going to be just another California Silicon Valley techer moving in and gentrifying the community. And I think what makes Tulsa so special is that it's a grateful community, a welcoming community. People are excited when somebody from California or New York moves here, excited to learn, excited to get them connected, and supportive of them.
I think one of the things that has kept me in Tulsa when I had opportunities to leave is I feel like in Tulsa, rather different from a lot of cities, is that there is a real opportunity to make a tangible difference as an individual, where in like a lot of the cities you mentioned, you really, it's difficult to make a true difference. Whereas here, there we have plenty of problems. As you said, we're generally open about many of our issues, but there are also a lot of very philanthropic organizations that are willing to help fund organizations that want to work on those problems. And if you dedicate time and resources to those problems, you can actually move the needle on them. And I think that can be an exciting selling point for a lot of people, is actually use you could argue some of the weaknesses of the community actually as a selling point to give people who want to make a difference a place where they can make a difference.
I think that's incredibly insightful. The answer is yes. We are extremely lucky that this community, in my opinion, is one of the coolest communities I've ever lived in, because there are more people per capita actively working to make this city the place they want to see in the future than anywhere else. And we do have a lot of things to overcome as a community. And there are plenty of foundations that are ready and willing to support individuals that have great ideas on how to solve that. And when we are authentic and vulnerable about the city's issues, the people who come to visit through Tulsa Remote get excited about the opportunity to get involved to affect change. That, I believe, is a major motivator for our generation, is a desire to have a positive impact in the community. And it is difficult in a city like San Francisco to get involved in something that you're passionate about. If you care about homelessness, that's an amazing thing to be passionate about. How do you get connected in San Francisco to the city leaders that are actively working on solving those issues? I can tell you who to get in contact with here in Tulsa, and could probably get you a meeting within a week.
I think we interviewed one of them on an earlier podcast.
I think we did.
If you are excited about music and you want to get involved in the symphony, how do you do that in Denver? I can tell you exactly how to do that here in Tulsa. And if you have tangible skills that you can lend to nonprofit organizations, they are incredibly excited to welcome you into their ecosystem to help support the initiatives and the causes that you care about. It's a pretty amazing, I think that we're at a really, really interesting point at a city. We're large enough that we have some pretty amazing influence in the country, but we're small enough that you can still get connected pretty quickly.
Well, that's one of the things I noticed in Boston was even when I got into a job where my job was literally connecting people to other people, there was always a barrier I had separating me from the people who would eventually become me, in the sense that people who grew up in the Boston area, moved away and came back, were always going to have deeper connections than I was ever going to be able to have. They would know people because they grew up with someone's daughter, or, went to school with someone's son. There was these weird barriers that I was never going to be able to push through. And I was at a point where I'm like, why am I putting so much energy into a community that is going to be fine whether I'm here or not? Right. But in Tulsa, again, like, I knew someone who used to have my job who connected me to you to get you on this podcast today, right? Like that would have been 20 more steps in another city.
Right.
Let me ask you, not every, like, again, there are lots of great positive programs coming out of all the foundations in town, but I imagine on top of all the positive press Tulsa Remote has gotten, there's probably been, I'm guessing, some pushback about the use of resources to help bring other people here versus using that money to, say, help people here. Has that been something you've run into?
Yeah, I'm sure. There are individuals who have communicated that they think that it would be better use of money to put it towards the individuals that are already here. But really, that's an opportunity to educate, to say, this is actually for the people who are already here. I had a really incredible career. I was very lucky. I was privileged. I was privileged to go to an amazing school in Boston. I was privileged to take the risk to move to New York City for a job. And because of that, I got the opportunity and was privileged to work at Apple for as long as I did, which gave me the flexibility to move back to Tulsa when I did not have a concrete job. So I've been able consistently to take risk, and that was born out of privilege. If I had wanted to have my career in Tulsa, it would have been incredibly difficult because of a lack of representation of my industry. The goal of this program is to quickly diversify the industry and potentially provide representation in every possible way to create an ecosystem in Tulsa that allows a child who has not been given the same kind of privileges that I've been given an opportunity to have the career of their dreams. If it were my choice, I would love to be able to provide the opportunities that I had to every single person born in Tulsa, but I don't have that option. But if we can create a community and an environment here in Tulsa where no matter how you've been born or what opportunities you've been given, there's a chance for you to connect with somebody who has the kind of career that you want to have that potentially looks like you. That's an amazing opportunity. So for the people who are critical of the resources being used to attract new people, the opportunity is to say, we are trying to provide more opportunity for the people who are already here, who potentially don't have the freedom to leave, by bringing in people who do have the freedom to come. And the idea of economic development is not a new one. There are tax dollars that are spent every year on trying to attract companies. And historically, talent went where the jobs were. But as remote work is continuing to evolve, jobs are now going to where the talent is. I think that Amazon headquartered HQ2 search that happened last year is a great example. They didn't pick the cheapest place to live, right? They went to the place where the talent was most readily available. And so by focusing on attracting talented people instead of trying to attract a company, you can potentially be on the front curve of a new model of economic development.
Yeah, and I think with the focus in a lot of programs, the Kaiser Family Foundation is sort of trying to prepare Tulsa to be part of the economy of the future, to lessen the impact of things that have affected us historically, like downturns in oil and gas prices and, financial service industries, which seem to be two of the largest historically employers here. So how do you see this plugging into preparing Tulsa to be part of the economy of the future?
I wouldn't want to speak for the foundation. I think that the foundation is excited to continuously think about new ways to attract talented people here to help diversify the industry that exists. I believe that Tulsa Remote is a small part of an overall strategy to make Tulsa the best place for a child to be born, grow, and succeed. You would have to speak with somebody at George Kaiser Family Foundation to get a better understanding of their entire strategy. Mm-hmm. But I believe that Tulsa Remote fits in very, very closely to the overall strategy of the foundation.
Well, to kind of take a different spin on it, not just GKFF, but a lot of organizations in Tulsa are trying to find ways to make Tulsa as open and supporting of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And so there are all kinds of new programs that are designed to help somebody trying to start a business here. Mm-hmm. So do you see a tie-in with Tulsa Remote that some of these people would build and grow businesses here?
Absolutely. These are incredibly successful individuals who have earned the opportunity to have flexibility in wherever they live. Mm-hmm. These are not entry-level individuals. They are successful individuals. And a lot of them have really amazing ideas. And you bring in these people and it's just a matter of time before there's collaborative collisions that happen and ideas sprout. And if we can develop an ecosystem that cultivates entrepreneurship and provides individuals with clear pathways to resources, I think that you'll see Tulsa Remote supporting the overall entrepreneurial spirit of the city.
Quasi-tangent is one of the things I've always wanted to compliment Tulsa Remote on is, and it took me a while to figure out why, but then once I was told why, it makes perfect sense. But Tulsa Remote has one of the best local Tulsa job boards I have ever seen. Like, it compiles it by company. It is like visually appealing. And when I asked Susie why, like, this seems to go against what the point is, and she was like, a lot of people who come here aren't single. They have significant others. Those people also need jobs. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. But it is, I mean, as someone who's been looking for jobs for 9 months, like, it is gorgeous. It's beautiful to look at. Like, I enjoy using it, which does not usually happen. And that made me think about the fact that Tulsa Remote thought that far ahead. Like, that shows a very, deep sense of understanding. How do we get people to stay here? We have to make sure their significant others, other family members are able to find work. I just wanted to compliment you on that.
Well, thank you. I believe that, we're we're the first to accept people into a program that provides them a financial incentive to come into a city. And we're not the last. And there are communities that are actively doing it. And I think one way that they potentially miss the mark is it's really not about the money. Again, the money removes risk. What this program is about, and why I believe that it's been successful, is that it's honest. It is saying, we understand that there is a target audience that is potentially thinking about moving. They probably have not considered Tulsa, or they've considered Tulsa and need kind of a kick in the right direction. What does that individual need? that individual needs to know where they're going to work. That's why we provided a partnership with 36 Degrees North to provide co-working space for each of the individual. Not everybody uses it every day, but it's still a resource that's there. And there's a built-in community of it that helps them get connected quickly to Tulsa. We showed them where they live. We partnered with property management groups in Tulsa that actually provide additional incentives. Some of them provide additional incentives to Tulsa Remote participants, helping ease the process of transition into the city. And we did consider the partners. So you have to think about the entire person and the entire situation that they're in. Not to take this down to just a marketing strategy, but if you understand very clearly who your audience is, you can create something that really supports them authentically. And that's the only way that I think you're going to have long-term success, is if you truly understand who you're trying to attract and you're providing all the types of support that they need. This year we launched a housing portal. I don't know if you've been to the site recently.
I checked it out today, actually. But yeah, the housing portal, I saw like very detailed information about, downtown apartments, but also houses all over the city. One that looks like a ginormous tree house that sold, apparently. But I was like,
I know, I wanted to buy that one.
That house is incredible. I'm not 100% sure where it is, but man, it's gorgeous. But
it would have been a little bit of a trek for me, but it's a gorgeous house. And that's something that that was strategic, right? We wanted to show individuals the kind of housing opportunities. I mean, honestly, that house that you're talking about, I think, was 3,500 square feet. It was absolutely gorgeous, and the craftsmanship of it was impeccable. You couldn't buy a garage in San Francisco for the same price as the house. Right. And so, I've never been a fan of promoting low cost of living as a benefit of a community. I think that is an ancillary benefit, that it costs less, but it's not a reason why somebody's going to move somewhere, right? If it is, there are cheaper places than Tulsa. It becomes a race to the bottom. What I try to focus on is the quality of life that you can have here in Tulsa. And that quality of life includes it being less pressure. And right, living in San Francisco, there's a person, Oboom, who came through the program who lived in LA, and he's originally from Ferguson, Missouri. And he has started a nonprofit in Missouri. He had all these dreams of getting really, really involved when he was in Los Angeles. But honestly, just the pressure of living in the city was so high that he didn't. And when we did the interview, we did a video interview with him. Every person who comes to the program applies, and then at a certain stage, we do a video interview with them. And many of them come and visit Tulsa too in the process. But when we were doing the video interview, Oboom spoke of how passionate he was about getting involved again in ways that he had in the past, but hadn't. You can always say, well, have they really tried? Are they telling the truth? Is that wishful thinking? I can tell you right now that Oboom has gotten involved in more ways than any other person I have ever met. And it is a testament to when you remove barriers and help people transition into a community that is supportive in the quality of life. Again, quality of life being tied to the ease of life allows them to get involved. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I mean, it's small things I noticed the older I got living in Boston, that things I didn't think about needing and didn't care about needing eventually were things that I wanted, because, as you get older, they're like, you want to go out and you want to get involved, but like you also have to, do laundry and make dinner and drive around. And after a while, you're like, I don't have the energy to do all of these things.
No. Well, and when doing laundry takes you 3.5 hours in New York because you're afraid
40,
somebody's going to steal your laundry if you leave it.
Cost, like, how much was a load when you were living in New York?
I don't remember at all. But
it was $250 a load in Boston when we left, and I was like, this is insane.
Technically in San Francisco, there are more things to do in Tulsa. Technically. But I do far more in Tulsa than I ever did in San Francisco because, so I worked at Apple, which was in Silicon Valley, right? Which was in Cupertino, 45 miles from my house, 45 miles. So every day we're commuting back into San Francisco, which took an hour to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. So by the time I got home, the idea of getting back out and dealing with either a 45-minute ride in an Uber that cost me $25 or an hour on a bus to get to another part of the city to go out was a little challenging. So one of the first things that I remembered when I first moved back to Tulsa, my mom's birthday was just a few days after I arrived back in Tulsa. And I went to a salon and got her a gift card. I went to a shop in Utica Square to get her a birthday card. I went to the grocery store to go get groceries to cook dinner over at her house. And I ended up at her house an hour earlier than I expected.
That would have taken like 6 hours. Yeah.
2 days.
Yeah.
I would have scheduled 2 different days to do it because the idea of going in one direction and another, it would have been crazy. So I find myself doing more. And what's really cool is I find people who have kids doing more socially here than in San Francisco. My friends, I'm 40 years old, and my friends in San Francisco were having kids, and it became incredibly difficult for them to go out and to do things and to find babysitters. And here I see my friends out all the time, and I think that's really cool. And I've heard feedback from people that they find themselves going out more often here and having a busier social life here in Tulsa than they did in New York or San Francisco.
My friends in Boston who ended up having kids, they all had to move to one of the farther away suburbs to afford having kids to have a house or apartment big enough. And so it just became another barrier to see them and for them to see us and for them to come into town because they had to move to Melrose or whatever. I'm referring to one particular friend of mine, but I was like, we went out to see them, but a lot of their other friends did not because, even though it's only like 10 miles away, it takes you an hour and a half.
Right. And so at the end of the day, if all you're really looking for is great food, great drinks, and connection to good people, I believe wholeheartedly that is more accessible here than in any other city that I've lived in.
So, I know we've talked about a lot of the awesome things that people have got from the program. I'm curious, what are some of the things that they're like, man, I really wish Tulsa had, this one thing, or I would absolutely stay here no matter what if they just had this.
If Tulsa had blank.
Yes. Have you gotten any feedback along those lines?
Sure. I mean, sure. I'm trying to think of the best way to communicate this. Some of them are really easy to communicate, right? Like we need more direct flights.
Right.
Yes. We're getting there. Yeah. We're getting there. A direct flight to New York. We had a flight to San Jose that isn't there anymore, but we need one to San Francisco and to New York. And I think that would make a really big difference. LA made a huge difference for people.
We're about to get one to Baltimore. That'll be nice too.
That'll be great.
Baltimore,
yeah. No,
DC area.
Flying home from Boston to here was more expensive than flying from Boston to anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I came back from Madrid, and my flight from Madrid to New York was shorter than my flight from New York to Tulsa. But at the same time, when I lived in New York City, I would fly out of LaGuardia before I'd fly out of JFK. I'd fly indirectly through LaGuardia with a layover. I'd fly direct to JFK just because it was more predictable. I would have to leave 2 hours, maybe more, before my flight to JFK just in case there was traffic. Yeah. I like to tell people, when I was living in an apartment downtown, it would take me 12 minutes to not just get to the airport, but get to my gate.
To the gate, yes.
To my gate.
Yeah. Going through security here
is $5
on
an Uber ride. It was incredible. So that's an easy one to mention. Mm-hmm. I think that things that are a little bit more complicated, I would say that, you bring in an extraordinarily diverse group of individuals. Mm-hmm. We haven't always been as inclusive as we should be. Mm-hmm. Intentionally inclusive, and that is a huge failing of Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And I think there are leaders who are getting it, and I think that is a testament to community leaders that have been extremely focused on ensuring that the leaders of Tulsa hear that message.
Well, let me ask you this: so you're accepting applications now for year 2 for people in 2020. What lessons have you learned from year 1 that you're taking into year 2?
We focused quite a bit on ensuring that the partners of participants, family members of participants, felt included. But we're going to focus even more on that this year. I think the biggest lessons that we've learned were just how to deal with scale. The we launched this program not knowing that we were going to receive over 10,000 applications in less than 10 weeks and having to shut it down because we were still receiving 125 applications a day and needing to start digging into that. So it took us a while to get back to some individuals, 3 months before a lot of people heard that they were accepted into the program, which is a long time, especially when you're thinking about picking up and moving across the country. So we figured out how to streamline the entire process. That's a big lesson learned that that was unavoidable, but it's really exciting to see how much more efficient the whole process is and how we can focus so much more on the personal relationships with the people who are applying.
Do you get many international applicants, and is that part of the scope of the project, or is the focus on right now the domestic applicants?
We do receive quite a few international applications. We received more last year than we did this year, which I think is a testament to just the focus of the program this year. Last year, there was a lot of international press. We do not help with the legal aspects of being able to work in the U.S. So if an individual is a U.S. citizen living in another country or has the legal ability to work in the U.S., for one reason or another, they're more than welcome to apply, but we're not supporting the acquisition of visas or anything like that program.
Okay. So it's not that you're actively discouraging it, but it's not necessarily a focus of your pool, and you're not providing active support related to that.
Right. It's not a specific focus, but we wouldn't, again, we never want to cancel out a person who'd be a great fit. We are looking for talented individuals that have a desire to move to a new community, that are looking to be a part of a positive change in that community. And all the other variables are just variables.
So I think you've talked about different aspects of it, but can you walk us through kind of what is the process from when somebody applies to when they're accepted and actually when they move here?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to bore everybody with every step of the process, but it starts off with them filling out an application on TulsaRemote.com. After they fill out that application, somebody from the team reviews and if they choose so, moves them to a semifinalist position where they do a video interview with somebody from the Tulsa Remote team. We as a group then, after every week, make decisions about the people that we've done video interviews with, who we want to move forward. If those individuals have not had a connection to Tulsa before, we invite them to come and visit. The goal is, again, not to convince somebody to move to Tulsa sight unseen. It's to showcase what Tulsa is and attract the people who are excited about being part of the community. So we want to make sure that they are very aware of what Tulsa is. And we do a tour of Tulsa when they're here visiting. And again, we go deep into the good and the bad. We go directly into Greenwood, and we talk about the race massacre. We talk about UCAT and the TDA and the history of the land that's just north of the IDL. And I think that, again, that opportunity to be vulnerable and authentic attracts the types of individuals who are excited about being part of the conversations that are happening here in Tulsa. And I want to touch on that again, that Tulsa is in a very unique situation where, I don't know of many cities that are our size in this part of the country that are actively having the conversations about equity that Tulsa is having. And I believe wholeheartedly that the more vocal we are about this, the more vulnerable we are about this, the more our city leaders are willing to have these difficult conversations. Not only is it the right thing to do, but there is an economic benefit to a community by showcasing that we're willing to admit failings and push the community forward. And listen to voices that have been unheard for a long time.
So I think there are a lot of people in this community like me that are very passionate about Tulsa and, love ideas like anything that can bring either people back to Tulsa or new people to Tulsa. How can they get involved to help support the program, support the people in the cohort? How can they get connected?
That's a great question. There are a lot of different ways that people can get involved. first and foremost, if you meet somebody from Tulsa Remote, be nice to them and ask them how you can help them get connected. Tulsa Remote got people's attention, and $10,000 helped them move here, but it's not going to help them stay here, right? Mm-hmm. It's the city of Tulsa and the people of Tulsa that are going to convince these individuals to stay. And if they don't stay, they will hopefully be advocates and ambassadors to the community wherever they end up, because of their experience in Tulsa being so positive. And there's definitely an ancillary benefit to all of that.
Yeah, because I imagine you living on the East Coast and on the West Coast had to, on occasion, defend the middle of the country all the time.
I should have gotten a salary. I was regularly the first person somebody had met from Oklahoma, let alone Tulsa.
Oh, yeah.
And I had an opportunity to change perceptions. And, a lot of my friends were not surprised that I moved back to Tulsa, because they knew how much I cared about this community and how excited I was about the trajectory that it's going. Mm-hmm. Tulsa is going to grow. And as you were saying, you're passionate. There are a lot of people who are passionate about Tulsa and want to see it grow. Tulsa is going to grow. It's whether or not it's going to grow in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And we need individuals who are active in the conversations, who care about accessibility and affordability in urban core, who care about education, who care about public transportation, who care about food deserts, being part of the conversation to ensure that as we grow, we've learned from the other communities that came before us to ensure that as we grow, that nobody is being left behind in that growth. So easy thing is just to be nice to the Tulsa Remote participants. If you want to get involved in actively working with Tulsa Remote, we have a Facebook group that you can join, and we will be starting this year to invite individuals to events that are happening throughout the year. You can also email info@tulsaremote.com and give your contact information. We'd love to have ambassadors to the city help us welcome these new people into the community, for sure.
Awesome. Well, one of the things that we do ask, one of the final things, is if there is anything that you'd like to plug, any events or anything related to Tulsa Remote that you'd like to get out there. You mentioned the Facebook group. Is there anything else?
No, we've already received so many amazing applicants this year, but that does not mean that we're not looking for more and more people to apply who you think would be a great addition to the Tulsa community. So I would encourage anybody who knows someone who's a remote worker who's thinking about moving to a new community to tell them about TulsaRemote.com and have them sign up, because it's always referrals that end up being, the really amazing individuals. Mm-hmm. So, more and more people who hear this podcast who tell really talented individuals about Tulsa, the better it is for the community.
I'll make sure our one German listener knows about the program. So.
Hey, you've seen it. We have listeners across the country.
We do.
Maybe not a lot of them, but we have them.
Random in Maryland randomly.
Yes.
And I'm always curious about. I'm like,
we have tens of listeners outside of Oklahoma.
We do.
Well, very exciting.
Well, I apologize if I've caused you to lose any listeners.
No, we do that all
around.
Yeah.
Chris and I can handle that by ourselves. So the last thing. The last thing we do is we have our guest sort of look around the Pod for Good Nerd Cave and sort of either find something that calls to them or find something that you're like, I need to know what this is. Please explain it to me. So we'll give you a minute to look around.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things in here.
I feel like you're exposing my non-nerdiness. I want people to think that I am, but I'm not.
Listen, there are lots of safe bets to pick in this room too.
I assumed everyone that worked for Apple had to be nerdy.
Yeah, some of us faked it.
By the way, Jesse, is the Romulan ale new, or have I just never?
No, we had it. It was just hiding in the kitchen somewhere. Okay. But that was a energy drink that we had at our wedding.
Oh my gosh!
It was not good, but it was blue.
You had a specialty energy drink for your wedding?
It was a gift from a friend, actually.
I thought you had like an energy drink sponsoring you.
No, God, that would have been great.
You had great. Like people with backpacks carrying around Red Bull.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
So tell me, the steampunk hat is obviously something that got my attention when I first walked in. Tell me a little bit about the steampunk hat.
So that steampunk hat came from a birthday party we just threw for the unnamed person who also lives in this house. And it was a murder mystery set in the future, but the dress code was, 1920s steampunky-ish. So
Well, it was for your character.
that's true.
I was Ivan the Horrible. I don't know why they didn't just go with the actual Ivan
Yeah,
the Terrible name.
they
It's
changed all
fine.
the historical names.
So I had to go as best I could, appropriate to a Tsarist Russian sort of outfit.
Yes. I was from the recent past, and apparently, like, steampunk never goes out of style. So that was my hat.
Recent past being a rave in 1993.
Yes. Yep.
I also have always appreciated with steampunk the way they have goggles on the hats that can't be removed.
Nope.
So you can't actually use the goggles.
They are
so
just
they're
for
purely
show.
decorative goggles.
Exactly.
Listen, people will always have decorative things that should be for use, but you can't use them. So also goggles, like, really, other than swimming now, do we ever really wear goggles?
I assume scientists do. Are you supposed to wear goggles when you're like weed eating or something?
Don't people just wear the safety glasses now instead?
I don't know.
Anyway, if any of our listeners know the answer to that question, please email
Please
us.
comment with
Yeah.
uses of goggles
Yes.
for us.
Because these are the things that matter to Telsons. All right, well, we
See, I
will.
told you we could run off listeners all
That's
by
right.
ourselves.
That's right. Well, we will get a picture with you. Usually we have them holding the item, but I guess in this case we will have
If you
you.
want, you can wear
You
the
can wear the
hat.
hat for the
That
picture.
may or
so.
may not happen.
All right. Well, our listeners will have to check out our Facebook page to see whether he's holding the hat or wearing the hat. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes,
and
thank you. It's a pleasure.
we look forward to running into people from cohort 2. I don't know if you're calling it cohort 2, but
Or cohort 1.
yeah, cohort
Don't
1.0.
exclude cohort
That's true.
We've always been really careful about, staying away from calling the Tulsa Remote participants anything other than participants, because at the end of the day, they're just new Tulsans.
Yeah.
And we don't want there to be a separation. Like a big goal has been to be careful of not creating a subculture, right? So getting them connected, making them just new Tulsans and helping them become known Tulsans pretty quickly. So
Well, luckily Tulsa's a good town for that because everyone here is super nice, and I'm still retraining my brain for it. So
I know. Exactly.
yeah, just having conversations with people on the street, I'd gotten completely out of practice on that. So
Right.
well, again, thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
I hope you all enjoyed our episode with Aaron Bolzle from Tulsa Remote, and we hope that you've liked all the episodes we've done so far. I want to thank all of you, our listeners, for helping us get over the 1,000 downloads mark. We appreciate it immensely. We hope you enjoy these episodes, and please remember to subscribe and to share this podcast on social media so other people can hear it, and to email us at potsforgood@gmail.com if there are interesting people you think would be great people to talk to on this podcast. We want to reflect all the amazing things that are happening in Tulsa, and to do that, we need your help. So thank you all. Get it done, Tulsa.